Since the start of the pandemic, which incidentally was 4 years ago this week, school boards have been the target of a lot of attention. It's not easy to be a school board member. The hours are long and many don't get paid for it, but they're still elected officials. A mom in Gladstone says she went to her local school board to tell them about the things she didn't like at her kid's school, and they told her she doesn't get to speak at board meetings unless they approve what she says ahead of time. Our producer, Ashley Koch, has this story.
In the past few years, we've seen school board meetings get pretty heated at times.
You are terror! I will not sit down!
Most of the time, they're still pretty boring. But sometimes the public comment period becomes open mic night for the latest hot-button political issue.
If we keep dealing with pronouns, we have to deal with it creates further issues in sports, what bathrooms to use, and much more.
How about instead of harmful transphobic policies, you all stop obsessing about the genitals in kids' pants?
Some school board members have said they don't always feel safe.
Life's been threatened. My wife's been harassed at school.
I've never had it to this extreme, and it's really hurtful and damaging to kids.
In any kind of government meeting, the public comment period is important for bringing up issues that the board might not know about. But when things go too far, when can the board hit the brakes? And who decides where that line is? Consider the case of Gladstone mom Glenda Scherer. This is what she says happened when she criticized the Gladstone School District.
I got a letter in the mail basically saying that I had to ask the superintendent's permission to come to school board meetings.
It started back in 2020 when schools closed because of COVID. Scherer says she started posting on the district's Facebook page.
My main criticism of the district was that they weren't following the guidance from Oregon Department of Education regarding the comprehensive distance learning that was in place.
Scherer says the admin running the district's Facebook page started removing her posts. She says they sent her this note saying that her posts, quote, weren't helping, and that we're all doing our best to make distance learning work. The admin told her that if she can't, quote, be positive, she'd be removed from the page. But it didn't stop there.
Just continued to escalate of not allowing me to tag them on social media.
Scherer was then told that if she wanted to speak up at school board meetings, she'd have to send them her comments in advance for approval.
Say I had to submit my comments ahead of time, and they would go through and then send me an email and say, oh, you need to change this.
An email from then board chair Greg Lind in 2021 to Scherer stated, please stick to your submitted comments. And if a person goes off script, I will have to mute them.
And they didn't let me read it. And it had some pretty significant criticisms of failing to provide students with pencil paper packets and just basic things that as a teacher and educator, I knew that they needed to be doing. And then after I spoke out, it just seemed like it escalated. Like any comment I would make, they'd try to cut me off.
Another email to Scherer in 2022 from then board chair Steve Stewart says, unfortunately, since you do not wish to follow the set procedures and submit your comments ahead of time, I regret to inform you that I cannot allow you to speak. And another email tells Scherer that she needs to edit the first paragraph of her comments.
The district just doesn't want to hear my criticism, and I'm not calling names.
Scherer says she continued to voice concerns about the district and called out specific district employees until she was banned from district property by Superintendent Bob Stewart. Now she's suing, challenging the policies. Her attorney says it's a case of prior restraint, a violation of the First Amendment protection on free speech. Scherer's attorney, Dean McGee.
Prior restraint is essentially when the government tries to regulate and censor speech before it's even uttered. That's the gist of it.
The First Amendment strictly limits when the government may use prior restraint. They are allowed to put restrictions on public comment, like time limits.
Is this demand that the public pre-submit their comments to a government board for review to make sure that the government board is pleased with the comments before they're spoken out loud. It's really outrageous.
The district chose not to comment on this story or answer written questions from KGW. They did provide us with copies of the emails sent to Scherer that confirmed she was told to pre-submit comments and later banned from meetings. Gladstone School Board meeting policies state that all regular, special, and emergency meetings of the board will be open to the public. and that the public has a right to attend public meetings held in open session and may be invited to share comments, ideas, and opinions with the board during designated times on the agenda. We couldn't find any policy that lays out grounds for removal from school board meetings, although their policies forbid calling out district employees by name. Scherer's attorney says this rule is too broad to stand up to the First Amendment.
There's a whole section of the meeting about recognizing something like recognizing teachers and students, and that's a really nice thing to do. But when you're saying essentially that school officials can be spoken about positively, but they cannot be criticized, that's viewpoint discrimination.
The school board policies also state that all members of the public attending school board meetings must treat each other and the board with respect. McGee says that's also too broad.
And that's just not a demand the government gets to make. Glenda happens to be a very respectful person, and I think she's conducted herself respectfully, but she's allowed to make criticisms, and a government board can't vaguely tell you that your free speech rights are determined on whether or not you respect them.
But Jim Oleski, a law professor at Lewis and Clark, says some courts have decided that boards can establish rules around decorum in meetings and prohibit the discussion of individual employees. But the bar is high.
Is treating people with respect, is that too vague? If that empowers a government official to enforce it very differently with respect to the people they like and the people they don't like, that starts to raise a danger of violating the free speech clause.
And he says the Supreme Court of the United States has recently shown a lot of interest in protecting free speech.
One thing that is pretty clear is that if the policy prohibited only criticism but allowed praise, that would be what we would call viewpoint discrimination. And the courts would be very likely to find that unconstitutional.
Scherer says she just wants to have a voice at the meetings.
The school board member is elected to be my representative in public education. And so in order for that person to do his or her job, they need to know what the public wants and what is important to the public. And yes, it is an uncomfortable conversation.
Ashley Koch, KGW News.
Well, now's your chance to weigh in. Where's the line when it comes to publicly criticizing elected officials? Do you think a school board should be allowed to ban members of the public if they feel that person is being disrespectful or continually criticizing them? Let us know how you feel. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail 503-226-5090.